Good morning. Um, just had a lengthy, it was actually over the course of a few weeks, kind of an email discussion with a person who, um, it turns out they would need to try to prevail on a reopen, um, requesting the SSA to reopen a prior denied determination. In this case, it was a determination, not a decision. A decision is when you actually appeal all the way to the ALJ and the ALJ makes a decision. Underneath that, it's usually referred to as a determination. Okay, so what's a reopen? And how can that benefit you possibly? If you have a denial on initial or reconsideration, I'd say, and you failed to appeal it, maybe you just figured works in it, it's done, and you gave up. And then you learn about a reopen. There are times if you can prove there is a reason under the rules for a reopen, that old application that has now become pseudo final may be reopened. And then you can continue that claim. The usual way we see this is because of new and material evidence that existed at that time and would have changed the decision or the determination into an award of some kind. So I will post the links to the POMs and other rules and policies, after I post this. But so just look below for that. But just know that, so if we're speaking about Social Security Disability Title II versus Supplemental Security Income, which is Title 16, they both have provisions for reopening, but they're not exactly the same. So the usual one we're talking about is a 4-year window, which is not a short amount of time. Although I've seen people go over that, and it's not available. But if you can ask for a reopen of an initial determination within 4 years, I assume to the day of that the initial determination, which the way the wording is suggests to me that even if you were denied on reconsideration, so you were denied an initial, you appealed, you went to reconsideration, and then you requested a reopen, it would be not 4 years from that latter denial of reconsideration, but 4 years from the initial denial, which would have been a few months earlier, probably. So that's my read of it. So just know that that's what you should probably be looking for, unless you in your due diligence find a different provision that kind of accepts that out. Anyway, so new and material evidence is the general way we see that go down. And it's very possible to have new and material evidence, because if you are relying on the SSA to get all of your medical records that existed, that means you also were accurate when you drafted your application and you kept them informed during that first initial medical review at the state agency. If you had, if you're relying on them to do that and you weren't calling them or faxing them or writing them every time you got a new doctor, a new appointment, or a new diagnostic, it's very possible that, they did an initial ordering of your records, which let's assume they came in, but then something transpired in the few weeks after that, before they came out with their denial decision, that could be missing material evidence. And material, that sounds so discretionary, right? I mean, what's material? They don't actually say you have to be able to prove you were disabled from that new material evidence, but that it's material. So it makes me want, because if the local office is looking at it, let's face it, they have no clue about medical workup. They're not the ones that do it. It's the people after them that do it in a totally different office. So I'm thinking material is something material to what level of disability you may be at, or I should say limitation, not necessarily proving in and of itself that you were disabled, that it rose to the level of disability. Because I think the decision is made at the field office as to whether to reopen. I don't think they do a whole new medical workup so that the DDS at the next step can say, all right, well, we'll go through everything and see if she has a reason to reopen. Because then that would presumably mean then they would be awarding you at that point. And they've gone through all the work when you may not have anything material to submit. So I'm thinking, and I'll try to find out about this. If it's the field office, they only look at it for materiality. Does it pertain to your disability at all? Or any disability? What if it's a medical record about a completely, totally different diagnosis that you never told them about, maybe you didn't know it. It shows up in that missing medical record. So it could be such a variety of things. And I always think, why not try it? It doesn't cost you anything. So reopen Title II, that's Social Security disability, 4 years if it's on the basis of just cause, which is new and material evidence by and large. And it's something to, consider versus filing a claim and not asking for a reopen. So assuming now that's assuming you still have DLI in front of you, right? Or at least after that denial. The case that came up for me, that I'm not taking on as an attorney, I was just trying to steer the person a little bit. They had a denial that ostensibly, let's say the denial was back in 2019. Their DLI was 2016 because they really either never applied during the time period when they should. And I'm always saying about don't snooze, it's term insurance. The DLI was 2016, files sometime then or after to prove that she was disabled back in 2016 or before when she has to prove it. And there was insufficient evidence according to the SSA, and they denied her. Now, she had submitted a 2019 letter from a doctor saying, she's describing her in a way that arguably would say that she was definitely disabled. If he was deemed to be credible and it was consistent with his other records and it wasn't, inconsistent with other records. But the problem with that 2019 doctor letter is that it's 3 years after the time period that she has to prove. And generally they want that stuff born in that period. I'd like to argue that a retrospective doctor, if a doctor says, hey, I treated her back in 15 and she was this bad then and she's this bad now, that makes sense to me, but I've seen that rejected numerous times. So the fact that it was born after the DLI, that medical evidence that he, was drafted and became official medical evidence of the doctors after, if that had a date on it from 2015, it would have been totally different, but it was born in 2019. So that was long after the person wasn't insured. She no longer had Social Security disability insurance, because as you know from other videos, that's term insurance and all of ours will run out if we stop working. So her ordeal was like twofold. She has to file and ask that this new filing also be a request for a reopen of that old initial denial that she never appealed. She was really in bad way, so she just couldn't appeal. And then if she gets the reopen, she still has to prove that yes, it rose to the level of making her fully disabled under the rules of Social Security before her DLI of 2016, whatever date, 2016, probably end of the year. That's like a two banger of misery, because reopens, not the easiest thing to do, particularly when it's now, what are we in 2023? The records are 7 years old or more. They might not even be available. I did urge her a couple months ago to go get those, just in case that any are still available, because they could disappear like that now. So she has to prove the reopen to get it reopened. And then she also has to prove a remote DLI case. That itself is tricky because, again, you can't birth evidence that's dated within the relevant time period of before 16 for an onset date. And then, of course, once she has the onset date, let's say she does prove that. Let's say she comes up with more evidence and it all shows that, yeah, and a judge is going to award that or find an onset. This new application with the reopen and everything is filed now in 2023. She has to prove through medical evidence that was in all those years in between, by and large, all the years in between, this continuity of that disability. So if she stopped treating, or some doctor didn't take notes or passed away and didn't send his records for some safekeeping someplace else, and there's, you might get away with a year, but I don't think you're going to get away with a couple of years or more of gap, of nothing to show that, you were disabled, even though you and I know that most of these kind of disabilities aren't going to improve spontaneously. But the onus is to prove that continuity, unfortunately, because sometimes people do improve and they didn't go to the doctor because they actually felt better. And then, we age and things got worse again, or the condition got worse or whatever. And then they picked back up again. And that lack of proof that the disability, they're just going to the doctor and complaining and continuing with maybe getting, regular diagnostics updated to see if things have gotten worse, all that kind of stuff. Can put the fork in it too. So she's got the doozy. Nobody likes to, none of us prefer to take a case with a remote DLI, because we can't advise them, hey, if you go and get this, this, and this, it'll prove that you were disabled. Can't, because that would be now and not then. We do take them with a little pain. And everything else has got to be like super duper so that we have something to worthwhile to work with. But by and large, letting that DLI expire is just a terrible thing for you to do to yourself. If you can in any way help it, don't do it. Okay. There's lots of videos on all the erroneous ways that people, not knowing, go ahead and expire out their DLI through not working. Stay-at-home moms and dads, caretakers of parents, children who are caretaking for their elderly parents, parents who, stay home past the age of the kids, 4 or 5 and starting school. It's a little troublesome. So, and some even, we have a recent one, I don't know if it's published yet, a person didn't report the earnings for like a family business, like a couple's business. They did it all under the one spouse and not under the other. So that other one became uninsured, and that other one is the one that became disabled. So that should have been, if they were both working that business, they both should have taken some of the income on their Schedule Cs if they were, sole proprietors or, partner, whoever they do it, and, taking accountability for some of the income. And then they each, pay their own self-employment tax on that, blah, blah, blah. Who knows? They might even be in lower tax brackets. But anyway, they didn't do that. And that was another way one of the two of them became uninsured. And that is the one that became disabled and therefore had a remote DLI. All right. That's enough about reopens. I'm gonna post the finer details, the links to the POMs and any other regs I bump into for you. All right. So you can read up, because there is a lot of reading there. It'll also give you, I should say, the reopen rules on SSI too. So, and I think maybe even CDR decisions. Anyway, all right. Chat with you later. Bye, guys.